Many times, Darwinists will claim that minor adaptations in bacteria, such as antibiotic resistance, are proof that Darwinian evolution is true. Yet that simply is not the case. In fact, when examined in detail, we find that antibiotic resistance provides evidence against Darwinian claims. The following video at the 2:15-minute mark shows that there is always a fitness cost associated with bacteria gaining antibiotic resistance. In the following article, Casey Luskin states, an antibiotic-resistant bacterium reproduces slower than it did before it was changed. This effect is widely recognized and is called the fitness cost of antibiotic resistance. It is the existence of these costs and other examples of the limits of evolution that call into question the neo-Darwinian story of macroevolution. In other words, it turns out that instead of creating anything new, antibiotic-resistant bacteria always degrade or modify some pre-existing molecular ability in order to gain antibiotic resistance. This following site provides a list of some of the degraded molecular abilities of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. In 2016, a video was made of bacteria rapidly adapting to higher and higher doses of antibiotics, and they claim that this was proof of evolution in action. Evolutionary biologist Jerry Coyne went so far as to claim that the video was a creationist nightmare. Yet, the fact of the matter is that no new information was generated in the rapid adaptations. Moreover, Michael Behe noted that the antibiotic-resistant bacteria demonstrate evolution by breaking stuff. What we have here is devolution, not evolution, the opposite of what needs to be explained. Moreover, the fact that antibiotic resistance was gained so rapidly in the video, as well as being gained rapidly in nature in general, should have been a solid clue for Darwinists that adaptations to antibiotics are not being generated by random Darwinian processes as they assume they are, but that antibiotic resistance is already programmed into the bacteria. And indeed, contrary to Darwinian thought, it is now found that antibiotic resistance, instead of being an ability that is new for bacteria, is an ability that is ancient, an ability that bacteria have had all along. In fact, one researcher who found antibiotic resistance in 4-million-year-old bacteria remarked that antibiotic resistance is hardwired into bacteria and could be billions of years old. As well, instead of antibiotic-resistant genes being something new, as Darwinists assume they are, it is now found that those vexing genes turn up everywhere in nature that scientists look for them. Also of note, there also appears to be an inbuilt mechanism in bacteria which kicks in during starvation, which allows wild-type bacteria to more robustly resist antibiotics than well-fed bacteria in the laboratory. As antibiotic resistance itself indicates, suppose beneficial adaptations that are often touted by Darwinists as proof of evolution are actually the result of degraded molecular abilities. Lee Spetner in his book Not by Chance, remarked that whoever thinks macroevolution can be made by mutations that lose information is like the merchant who lost a little money on every cell but thought he could make it up on volume. In 2016, Lee Spetner went on to remark, there is no example of a random mutation that adds heritable information to the genome, and that statement still stands. In the following article, Jonathan M. examines all of Jerry Coyne's supposed examples of evolution and finds each of them wanting as proof for evolution in the sense of evolution creating anything new. And in the following paper, Michael Behe surveyed 4 decades of laboratory evolution experiments with microbes and found that we had already known that the great majority of mutations that have a visible effect on an organism are deleterious, but now we know that even the great majority of helpful mutations degrade the genome to a greater or lesser extent. Even all the supposedly beneficial mutation in Linsky's infamous long-term evolution experiment with E. coli can be classified as modification of function or loss of function mutations. Of related note, Scott Minnick recently falsified Linsky's claim that the citrate adaptation observed in his coli was a unique speciation event that provided proof for Darwinian evolution. He did this by showing citrate adaptation is easily and repeatedly acquired under the right experimental conditions. Truly beneficial mutations are simply exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, to find. In the following paper, John Sanford and company state, it is almost universally acknowledged that beneficial mutations are rare compared to deleterious mutations. It appears that beneficial mutations may be too rare to actually allow the accurate measurement of how rare they are. The main reason they gave in the preceding paper for why beneficial mutations are exceedingly rare is because of multiple overlapping genetic codes, which is a condition in the genome which gives the genome the characteristic of being polyfunctional. And here's the conclusion in the paper. Polyfunctionality is represented by Dr. Sanford with this illustration, which is found on page 141 of his book entitled Genetic Entropy. This puzzle is translated to sower named Arepo holds the workings of the will. This ancient puzzle, which dates back to at least 79 AD, reads the same 4 different ways. Thus, if we change or mutate any letter, we may find a new meaning for a single reading read one way, but we will consistently destroy the 3 other readings with the mutation. Moreover, John Sanford's illustration is only polyfunctional to 4 elements of interdependent complexity. Yet, the interdependent complexity found in some genes with what is termed alternative splicing blows that level out of the water. As the following paper highlights, there is one human gene that encodes for 576 different proteins, and there is one fruit fly gene that codes for 38,016 different proteins, with most genes producing somewhere between 2 and 25 proteins. Moreover, The so-called junk regions of DNA, which do not code for proteins, are found by ENCODE to have more interdependent complexity than the genes do. The following article states that the genic regions are transcribed on average in 5 different overlapping and interleaved ways, while untranslated regions are transcribed on average in 7 different overlapping and interleaved ways. And indeed, as would be expected in a polyfunctional genome, the following paper found that epistatic interactions between beneficial mutations were all antagonistic. The effects of the double mutations were less than the sums of the effects of their component single mutations. And the following paper found that epistasis is much more pervasive than previously assumed, and that this strongly limits the ability of beneficial mutations to confer fitness on organisms. Deleterious epistatic interactions between supposedly beneficial mutations were also found in Linsky's infamous long-term evolution experiment with E. coli. Of a related note, Ralph Silk, while acknowledging the capabilities of evolution when it can take one step at a time, has done work showing the difficulties that evolution encounters when it must take 2 steps at a time. Ann Gauger and Ralph Silk have gotten together and performed an experiment which found that when 2 mutations were required to restore function, Darwinian evolution could not do the job. As should be clear by now, Darwinists simply have no evidence for the unlimited plasticity and/or flexibility in bacteria that they assume must be true in their presuppositions. In the following paper, Alan Litton, Emeritus Professor of Bacteriology, states that bacteria are ideal for this kind of study, but throughout 150 years of science of bacteriology, there is no evidence that one species of bacteria has changed into another. Ann Gauger and Doug Axe have found that Darwinian processes would need a trillion years or more to accomplish the seemingly subtle change in enzyme function that requires just a few mutations. And Michael Behe, in his book The Edge of Evolution, noted that the ability of the malaria parasite to develop resistance to chloroquine is a 2 mutation event with a probability of occurring of 1 in 10 to the 20. He then notes that for humans to achieve a mutation like this by chance, we would have to wait 100 million times 10 million years, or 1 quadrillion years, since that is the amount of time it would take to produce 1 in 10, or 10 to the 20 humans. Michael Behe then put what he has dubbed the edge of evolution to be at 10 to the 20 times 10 to the 20, which is equal to 10 to the 40. Behe puts the edge of evolution at 10 to the 40 since, as he states, there have likely been fewer than 10 to the 40 cells in the world in the last 4 billion years. And on page 135 of his book, Dr. Behe stated that generating a new cellular protein-protein binding site is of the same order or difficulty, or worse, than the development of chloroquine resistance in the malarial parasite. And that is a very interesting finding, since a protein can have dozens, if not hundreds, of different interactions. Moreover, as hard as it is for Darwinian processes to account for chloroquine resistance in the malaria parasite, the chloroquine adaptation came as a loss of fitness for the parasite, not a gain, as this study shows. Moreover, the supposed beneficial mutations that occur in humans that help humans fight against malaria are also found to be detrimental on the molecular level. Thus, contrary to Darwinian thought, and as the preceding evidence indicates, we should expect extreme stasis for bacteria over long periods of time. And indeed, that is exactly what we find. Ancient bacteria spores recovered from amber crystals and salt crystals, which are tens to hundreds of millions of years old, have been revived. And they have now been compared to their living descendants of today. To the disbelieving shock of Darwinists, almost without exception, bacteria isolated from ancient material have proven to closely resemble modern bacteria at both the morphological and molecular levels. Evolutionists were so disbelieving at this stunning lack of change, far less change than was expected, that they insisted the stunning similarity was due to modern contamination in Breland's experiment. Yet the following study laid that objection to rest by finding some ancient DNA sequences which were completely unique. I wrote an email to Dr. Cano and asked him if he had performed a fitness test on the ancient bacteria that he had revived to see if they were more fit than their modern-day descendants. He wrote back and said that he had done such a test and that we surmised that the putative ancient isolate was capable of utilizing a broader scope of substrates than the modern strain. Moreover, the ancient yeast that Dr. Cano had also isolated was also found to be more resilient than modern-day yeast in terms of making beer, as this following article shows. Moreover, in terms of morphology, billion-year-old bacteria surprisingly looked exactly like modern species, and the similarity in morphology is widespread among fossils of varying times. And here are a few more references to drive this point home. Of related interest, unique orphan genes are now being found in every new genome of bacteria sequenced, and crush any hope Darwinists had at ever finding a supposed evolutionary tree between bacteria. Here's a video by Dr. Paul Nelson that gets his point across. Moreover, there simply isn't any evidence in the fossil record indicating that single cells ever formed anything other than what are termed simple aggregates. Dr. Raymond Bolin comments on that here. And here a Chinese paleontologist commented that before the Cambrian we should see a number of steps: differentiation of cells, differentiation of tissue, of dorsal, of ventral, right and left, but we don't have strong evidence for any of these. And here's a humorous evidence against the claim that bacteria evolved into multicellular creatures. Simply put, I'm amazed that bacteria don't eat us. If evolution by natural selection were actually the truth about how all life came to be on Earth, then the only life that should be around should be extremely small organisms with the highest replication rate and with the most mutational firepower, since they greatly outclass multicellular organisms in terms of reproductive success and mutational firepower, would be fittest to survive in the dog-eat-dog world where blind, pitiless evolution ruled, and only the fittest are allowed to survive. The logic of this is nicely summed up here in this following Richard Dawkins interview with a physician. In other words, since successful reproduction is all that really matters on a neo-Darwinian view of things, how can anything but successful and highly efficient reproduction be realistically selected for? Any other function besides successful reproduction, such as much slower sexual reproduction, sight, hearing, thinking, etc., would be highly superfluous to the main criteria of successful reproduction, and should, on a Darwinian view, be discarded and or eaten by bacteria as so much excess baggage, since it obviously would slow down successful reproduction, which is practically the central and primary tenet of Darwinian theory. Yet, contrary to this central survival of the fittest assumption of Darwinian evolution, instead of eating us, time after time we find that microorganisms are helping us and each other in ways that have nothing to do with their own survival or fitness concerns. The following researchers said that they were banging their heads against the wall by the contradictory findings to Darwinian survival of the fittest thinking. And here are a few more references that help drive this point home. So the question naturally arises, what were those bacteria doing for all those hundreds of millions of years before multicellular creatures abruptly burst upon the scene in the Cambrian explosion? The answer to that question is that they were terraforming the primordial Earth into a habitat that would be fit for higher life forms to be introduced. As Paul Falkowski notes, microbial life can easily live without us. We, however, cannot survive without the global catalysts and environmental transformation it provides. Contrary to what materialism would expect, the bacteria found in the fossil record and by chemical analysis of the geologic record are shown to have been preparing the Earth for more advanced life to appear from the very start of their existence on Earth by producing the necessary oxygen for higher life forms to exist, and also by reducing the greenhouse gases on Earth's early atmosphere. And since oxygen readily reacts and bonds with many of the solid elements making up the Earth itself, and since the slow process of tectonic activity controls the turnover of Earth's crustal rocks, it took photosynthetic bacteria a few billion years before the Earth's crust was saturated with enough oxygen to allow a sufficient level of oxygen to be built up in the atmosphere so as to allow higher life forms to exist on Earth. In fact, Plate tectonics for 4 billion years has played a critical role in keeping Earth's temperature constant. Moreover, of related interest to photosynthesis utilizing carbon dioxide to produce oxygen, it is also interesting to note that virtually all the organic carbon in the biosphere and on Earth derives ultimately from the carbon dioxide that is fixed from the atmosphere. Moreover, some photosynthetic bacteria have now been found, besides producing oxygen and fixing carbon, to produce minerals that are useful to man. Here is an article that gets that one across. In fact, Hugh Ross notes that thanks to the way life was introduced on Earth, the early 250 mineral species have exploded to the present 4,300 known mineral species, and because of this abundance, humans possessed all the necessary mineral resources to easily launch and sustain global high-technology civilization. Moreover, Robert Hazen notes that the Earth's mineralogy is unique in the cosmos. And interestingly, while photosynthetic bacteria were reducing greenhouse gases and producing oxygen and minerals, which would all be beneficial to modern man, other types of bacteria, such as sulfate-reducing bacteria, were also helping prepare the Earth for higher life forms by detoxifying the primeval Earth and oceans of poisonous levels of heavy metals, while depositing them as relatively inert metal ores. In fact, bacteria are now also found to clean uranium from groundwater. To put it mildly, this minimization of poisonous elements and explosion of useful minerals is strong evidence for intelligently designed terraforming of the Earth that just so happens to be of great benefit, even essential, for modern man. Another piece of evidence against bacterial evolution is that microbes are turning out to be far more complex than anyone, especially Darwinists, ever expected. Michael Denton commented in his book Evolution, a Theory in Crisis that each cell from bacteria to man has a capacity not equaled in any of our most advanced machines, for it would be capable of replicating its entire structure within a matter of a few hours. Even the simplest life found on Earth gives every indication that life was intelligently designed. Here are a few references that get that point across. Moreover, the regulatory network of E. coli is found to be much more elegant than the operating system of Linux. Along that line, it is also found that bacteria solve optimization problems for collective decision making that are beyond what we, human beings, can solve with our most powerful computers. Moreover, the information content that is found to be in a simple bacterium when working from a thermodynamic perspective is staggering, on the order of 10 to the 12 bits, which is comparable to 100 million pages of the Encyclopedia Britannica. The level of complexity being revealed in supposedly simple cells is simply astonishing. As David Berlinski remarked, applying Darwinian principles to problems of this level of complexity is like putting a band-aid on a wound caused by an atomic weapon. It's just not going to work. One final note. As inadequate as Darwinian explanations are at trying to explain bacterial evolution, materialistic explanations for the origin of life turn out to be exponentially more inadequate. Here's a quote from synthetic chemist James Turr that gets this point across. The level of sophistication even the simplest of possible living cells is so chemically complex that we are even more clueless now than with anything discussed regarding prebiotic chemistry or macroevolution. James Turr also recently made this comment. The proposals offered thus far to explain life's origin make no scientific sense. Life should not exist anywhere in our universe. Life should not even exist on the surface of the earth. So that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. And again, all papers and videos referenced in this video may be accessed in the link provided in the video description. Thanks again for watching.